Happy Tuesday evening, everybody. Welcome into the first ever episode of One Up Fantasy from Shy City Sports. Welcome in. We are very excited. This has been a long time coming, and we are ready to get you ready and help you one-up the competition this fantasy season. Welcome in again. I'm Steven Johnson alongside TTNL Network's Chris Jackle. Chris, I am pumped. I am ready. There is plenty on the plate. It's been a fantastic day already. What do you say we talk a little fantasy?
First off, I've never seen you this excited ever. So to see this kind of energy out of you, it must mean something pretty good's happening. So welcome, everybody. This is great to be here with Mr. Johnson and get the ball rolling here on the first annual or the first ever podcast here, my man. And I'm looking forward to it, dude.
Absolutely. We've got the TTNL crew in the house. We got Shy City. We got everybody in the house. I love this already. One up. Hey, I like that. Maybe that'll stick here. We're 3 minutes in. We're rolling. We've got over 50 people watching already. So let's keep things rolling.
Look at this.
We got plenty to dive in here and discuss. So this initial episode, we're going to go over some of the things. It's training camp week. It is time to dive into the training camp battles. We'll talk anything and everything training camp across the NFL and some of the battles that might affect the fantasy implications for your drafts. Maybe you're drafting next week. I already have a few drafts in locked and loaded and already finished.
I've already had a few. So,
man,
we were just talking trades a little while ago. So it's, here we are. It's July 27th and we're
a couple degenerates. I
think my wife is still awake, so let's not, she may be listening. So let's not get too loud over there, Mr. Johnson.
Nevertheless, we'll go over that. We will go over some potential COVID ramifications if we're going to see something similar to what we saw in 2020, as well as give you a preview of some of the segments that you will be seeing here on One Up Fantasy this season as well. So without further ado, how about we just dive right into it? We'll talk training camp. Again, the Bears kicked off training camp today. We'll talk Bears as we wrap things up here. Plenty going on with Matt Nagy, and boy, did he have some very choice words to say in a way.
Leaving that door open a little bit for some pontification, if you will.
Teeny bit. But, man, we'll save the best for last there because, as always, Bears, the best. Hands down, all time. Facts. So we'll start things off in Denver. Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams. It looked like at the end of the season last year that Melvin Gordon might have the backfield to himself after signing a 2-year, $16 million deal with Denver. He is entering the final year of that deal. But here comes Javonte Williams out of UNC, a second-round pick for the Denver Broncos and John Elway in that front office. And all of a sudden we're back at square one looking like we're seeing a two-headed monster, similar to what we saw with man. That he is. Similar to what we saw with Philip Lindsay and Gordon a year ago. Is this a situation that you feel is going to take some time to play out here? Or is there a guy that you think is going to take advantage of this backfield out of the gate and kind of run with it?
Well, they're going to want to, in my opinion, I think Gordon's the guy they're going to want to go with right away. I think he's got the history. He has the pedigree, but I will say, Williams is pretty remarkable with the ball in his hands. I think he averaged like 7.3 carries or 7.3 yards per carry. That's pretty astounding in college. I don't care if you're, in the SEC, ACC, Pac-10, that's pretty damn impressive. 22 end zones touches. 22 carries that result in 182 yards. That he ultimately is going to take over for Gordon because Gordon's not going to stay healthy. Gordon also has been nicked up left and right, and I stumbled there, but it's first day. I'm just trying to,
all good.
Get the cobwebs out. Normally I'm in the background, and I'm clicking buttons and putting up imagery. So, if I fumble or stumble every once in a while, it's, hey, we're going to get there. But with all that being said, I think Gordon has the injury bug. He's been nicked up. He got on the drink last year and dealt with some issues off the field. And so, I'm hoping he is able to stay healthy for some of you out there. But, if you can get your hands on Williams, I think that's a pretty healthy pickup for anybody. I kind of gave you two sides of the coin. I don't even know if I answered your question, but, here we are. The Broncos got some good running backs regardless.
That they do. You mentioned the 7.3 yards per carry with Javonte Williams at UNC last year. Just looking at that line, 1,140 yards, 19 rushing touchdowns for Javonte Williams in 2020. So absolutely killed it. His ADP right now in PPR, anytime you hear us mention ADP, average draft position on One Up Fantasy, always talking about full point PPR.
Yes, sir.
Standard, meh. Not our shtick. That's not what
they're not around. Kind of the dinosaur, if you will, of fantasy leagues, right?
Yep, exactly. So Devontae, an ADP of 64 in PPR leagues across the board. Gordon, meanwhile, is at 76. So the consensus seeming to lean towards Javonte Williams being that guy, those fresh legs to get things rolling, to get things moving here. We got a couple comments dropping in as well. Rick saying defensive coach goes with the veteran to start. Vic Fangio back with Denver. I had a feeling he might not have been back there this year. He was playing with fire there for a little bit, but hey, they still have Drew Lock. Jerome, meanwhile, saying he's going to be a steal for the second half of the season. So those comments kind of going hand in hand there. Like you said, kind of starting off with Gordon, get things rolling. The thing that kind of concerns me about Gordon, and I think he's going to give you that goal line work. I think he's going to be that guy that's going to more or less siphon those touchdowns away from Javonte. Gordon, a decent season last year, 986 yards and 9 touchdowns, despite the issues that you mentioned with the off the field stuff, the injuries. But he also fumbled 4 times last year. Yeah, exactly. He did fumble 4 times last year, so there was that concern. We're talking about leaving that door open in Chicago. I think the same thing could be said here in Denver. You run into that situation of, okay, a couple drops here and there. Let's bring in the fresh young guy to potentially get the ball rolling, get this ground game running. That might be Williams in a month or so, that he just starts picking up the carries. You see him jumping from, maybe 8 to 10 touches a game up to 10 to 15. And again, by the end of the year, it's anybody's guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that being said, it's I think Jerome said it best. Second half is looking bright for Williams. I think that it's going to be a good thing. Regardless with Gordon to start or Gordon to finish. Gordon's going to pound the ball at the finish line at the goal line, and I think he's the guy that's going to get those goal line carries early on, and but Williams going to breathe that excitement. Just to piggyback your statement, I think once he gets in there and he starts. The electricity of him with the ball in his hands, I think he could just breathe some air and breathe some fresh air into that offense.
Yep. And that electrifying runner, that's what Javonte is. Again, about a round higher than what Gordon is going at, but it's one of those things where it's maybe worth paying the price a little bit for a couple weeks of not getting what you anticipate out of a guy in the 5th, 6th round where he's currently going. But again, I'm all on board it being a decent acquisition there for the Broncos and for any fantasy team to choose Javonte over Gordon just because of some of the shortcomings. And Gordon isn't getting any younger. We know he's got plenty of mileage all the way back to his days at UW. Moving on, the next stop on the training camp list, Baltimore. All of a sudden, they have a room full of wide receivers. A year ago, it wasn't looking all too great there. They draft Rashad Bateman, the second wide receiver in 3 years that the Ravens draft in the first round of the NFL draft. They bring in Sammy Watkins to pair up with Marquise Brown, their first-round pick from 2 years ago, as well as Mark Andrews, that you cannot forget about at the tight end position, kind of falling back there from his breakout season in 2019. Where do the targets lie between this group? Is this a group that will be led by the veteran Marquise Brown, but not so aging veteran Sammy Watkins? Is Rashad Bateman going to jump onto the field and impress us all? Or is the Ravens passing game just going to be the Ravens passing game?
Well, they're going to sling it. I think they want to throw the ball a little bit. Lamar's tired of the old narrative of all I can do is run, so he's going to throw that ball. And I think Miles Boykins is going to get some targets also over there. They're definitely going to be throwing the ball to some extent because they got a loaded backfield as well. I think you're going to see Watkins kind of sneak in there and kind of be the unsung hero of that group. I think coming from Kansas City, really being successful there and bringing that, the winning pedigree over there, I think could actually breathe, just some new life over in the Baltimore receiving room. They have some young guys, but they have that veteran leadership that I think could also lead to more of a better relationship with Lamar Jackson between him and oh my goodness, what the hell's his name? Help me out. I just lost it. This is horrible. Watkins. I'm sorry. Yeah, with Sammy Watkins. Coming back from from Kansas City, going over to Baltimore. I think that could be a really positive relationship between the two of them. And I could see him getting a little more targets than Bateman. But at the end of the day, I think you're still going to see Brown get the lead. The most of the targets there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's like you mentioned, that just the names that are on this roster. And, we talked about Brown and Bateman and Andrews and Watkins. You mentioned Boykin. Devin Duvernay is there as well. He was another guy that they picked up late in the draft last season. So, I mean, that's a room in for the wide receivers that's easily 6-7 deep. That's really going to see where things are going to shake up here. Yeah. Marquise Brown is one of those guys I've never been able to get behind, but he ended the season so strong last year, finished with 6 touchdowns in his last 6 games of the year, including a 2-touchdown performance in week 17. Don't play week 17 if you play fantasy. But it gives you that sense of hope that maybe he's turning things around finally. His rookie season, he dealt with a foot injury. Last year with COVID. This is really his first full offseason with the Ravens, where he's healthy.
And he's healthy, exactly.
I mean, that's a big thing for him. And right now he's got an ADP sitting at 106. Yeah. It's one of those guys where I've just never latched on to him. There's always been somebody else there around that ADP that's had me like, okay, I want this guy. I feel like I've been burned one too many times, but you dive deeper into the numbers. He's rather productive given the fact that this Ravens passing game doesn't ring the bell as prolific by any means. I mean, last year they threw it a league low 406 times. Yeah, Lamar Jackson had some injuries, and we got to see the horror that was RG3, or the shell of what RG3 was.
That's not fair.
I know. It's a low blow, but nevertheless,
I'm teasing.
It's funny because as the season went on, they actually had Lamar Jackson passing less as opposed to the beginning of the season. They kind of let him do his thing. And again, you go back to the point that you made about all the different players and all the different playmakers, not just in the passing game. You have J.K. Dobbins, you have Gus the Bus Edwards.
Duvernay's over there too.
Yeah, I mean, it's just stacking player after player after player. And to an extent, I almost want to say avoid all these guys, but then you look at some of the ADP for redraft. Rashad Bateman's at an ADP of 176. I mean, you're really at that point pushing a flyer on a guy that was fantastic at Minnesota. And honestly, if he went into the right situation, we could be talking easily about a wide receiver that is in the top 75. Of fantasy players this year for ADP. So it sucks because you get all hyped up about a guy, and then you get the bucket of water that is the Baltimore Ravens passing game thrown out.
And he could have went anywhere, and probably there would have been a much different narrative written about him. He could have been they were talking about him in the first round, coming out of the draft, and him, a little bit higher than he went. But with that being said, he's somebody that is promising, but like you said, a flyer at best right now. And that's not what we're looking to do right now. There's many guys that we could draft that have much better value. But who knows? Lamar could find everybody and he wants to hit 13 targets a game and they're rolling and they're in the AFC Championship talking trash, getting after it.
And that defense is never anything to turn your nose at either. So there'll be plenty of opportunities there for what they have. Quick note here on the running side of the game here. Gus is out for 10 days with COVID from camp. Does that affect the RB room, do you think? That coming from Caden. I'm going to say no. I don't think that's something you got to worry about. I still think J.K. Dobbins is a little underrated for where he's going and, what he can bring to the table. It would not shock me at all if this kind of pushes that along a little bit, but they gave Gus money for a reason. They think he's going to be that bruiser, that salt to the pepper of J.K. Dobbins.
Absolutely.
So, it's early. If it was end of August,
it's July 27th. Okay. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit, but no concerns there yet. I should say yet.
But it's COVID. You never know.
Yeah, that's very true. We've seen it knock quite a few players off their game for a lot longer than we anticipate. We'll stick with the wide receiver situation. We'll keep this one to a very simple question. The New York Jets.
They got all sorts of questions.
Oh, man. This is
one question?
Yeah, one question. Will they be fantasy relevant this year? Again, it's a remade room similar to what we saw with the Baltimore Ravens. You bring in Corey Davis from the Tennessee Titans. You also bring in Keelan Cole. You have Denzel Mims. You draft Elijah Moore.
Yeah.
And you have a new quarterback. And you have no more Adam Gase, which I'm sure every New York Jets fan is ecstatic about.
I'm not a Jets fan, and I'm happy about it, that dude was awful.
It's the reason why I'm not closing the door completely on Sam Darnold. He gets away from Adam Gase. He might turn into Ryan Tannehill like we saw in Tennessee. I digress. Are you going to touch any of these Jets receivers, or are you going to say, okay, give it a year, let's see where things fall with this new regime, this new quarterback, and hope for the best?
I mean, Corey Davis, I think he's a guy I'm definitely going to talk about. But with that being said, Jameson Crowder had a decent 2019. He's one of the top 7 in both yards and touchdowns from the slot since joining the Jets. So he's a guy that, he has some value. I think he played 12 games last year. It's like wide receiver. I think he was like wide receiver 39. He's a guy that, may be a late sleeper. Like, you got to last, but outside of that, Corey Davis or nobody else. I don't know about you, Steve, but I don't see anybody that I'm really looking to don any of my, my fancy named jerseys that I come up with for my team names, because I'm so creative,
It's funny because I was a hardcore Corey Davis truther when he came out of school. I'm thinking, okay, he's coming from a MAC school, Central Michigan. You get that, vibe that he's this big body receiver. He's just going to dominate. He's going to be like Randy Moss when he went to Marshall, and then nothing happens. And it's just dud after dud after dud.
Yeah.
And to his credit, last year, 984 yards on 65 catches. Not the most glamorous of seasons, but he did have his moments when A.J. Brown was out with the Titans last year. I'm on the fence about him. Again, that's another one of those ADPs where I'm like, depending on how the board falls, he might be one of the last options that has a guaranteed amount of targets gravitating towards him. It's just what's going on with the rest of that wide receiver room. I mean, they go and they draft Elijah Moore out of Ole Miss, but then they keep Jameson Crowder.
Yeah.
After more
Junior
or less
and senior, it seems like, right? Like they're one and the same. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's not only that, but the fact that Jameson Crowder called their bluff and said, you can take less or you can get cut. He took less. He was smart about it, and he took less to stay with the Jets. I don't understand why he wouldn't try and go to a good team, but here we are.
He likes the city life, who knows?
Yeah, maybe. Who knows? Exactly. It's New Jersey.
Yeah.
Jameson Crowder, an ADP of 163. Elijah Moore just behind him, which is kind of surprising that Elijah Moore is behind him. I know that it kind of fell back a little bit there once the news came through that Jameson Crowder was coming back. And then you talk about Denzel Mims. I'm seeing Denzel Mims comments from Caden in the comments section here. He's going to have a breakout season. Here's the thing that worries me about Denzel Mims. He had 357 yards in 9 games. Second round pick last year by an old regime. Like that. Yeah. That's the thing that irks me is when you have a full rehaul of what the Jets are and the guys that are there now did not pick you. Yep. I tend to back off of that. If you're in a dynasty league and you feel as though there's somebody in your league that still feels high on Denzel Mims.
Call.
If you're in a league with
Shoot
Caden,
that text. Yep.
Trade him to Caden.
Yeah, send him to
Caden. Trade him to somebody that still feels like there's something there. I will say he did show glimpses there mid-season, but the fact that they've brought in all these names and they even signed Keelan Cole, who is almost identical in build to what Denzel Mims is. It just raises red flag after red flag.
He's going to get the ticket in the locker. It's like, come see coach. I feel like he's got to turn his iPad in at some point. I don't know if he's going to stick around, but they, like you said, I mean, he's a second round pick. Maybe they could flip him to somebody that may want him. Maybe Caden's got a relative in the NFL that runs a team and they could move him over there. But, there's not many Jets I think I'd touch in fantasy anyway, so.
Yeah, absolutely. There's it's one of those offenses where, you hope it does turn around. There's been quite a gap since the Jets were fantasy relevant. I mean, hell, you got to go back probably even past butt fumble Mike Sanchez at one point there to get to something.
He made a few rosters, come on, and then he just was everybody's fantasy name, team name for a while, I had a few butt fumbles in every league I was in, so who knows.
But I definitely, from a wide receiver standpoint, Corey Davis has to be the only thing, at least from now, just on the guarantee side of things, that there's something there. Is that what I think? Did I see?
Yeah,
what
Cars.
I
think Cars is.
Cars is in the chat. Where are you drafting Zach Wilson's mom?
You got to talk to Zach.
Scares
first,
me. She scares me. Okay, the Tribe #1 overall. Godspeed for doing that.
God bless you for that.
We're gonna make our final stop here on the training camp train in San Francisco. They traded 3 first-round picks to move up and draft Trey Lance.
Yeah, rightfully so.
However, today the Niners saying that there is no quarterback competition. Jimmy Garoppolo is the starter heading into 2021. I'm not entirely sure how to take this. I don't know if it's just some talk. Because
semantics. Are we positioning over there in San Francisco?
I mean, they're not getting Trey Lance into camp on time.
No.
And I think the last thing you want is to give that leverage to say, this is a battle. And then you have the agent come back and say, well, if this is a battle, we need to work out some details of this contract that get me a little bit more in line. That worries the hell out of me. That's something that I'm not feeling too great about. If I'm a Niners fan, because all the difficulty has been around what Jimmy G has been for them. I remember that fan base erupted when they traded for him from New England.
Second coming to Joe Montana. It was amazing. People freaked out there. Rightfully so. Yeah, they were excited.
Then he tears his knee and then he messes up his ankle, and it's just one thing after another. In your mind, when does Trey Lance eclipse and take the throne of Jimmy G as quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers?
Well, first off, Garoppolo could just slip and fall in the shower and he could be starting tomorrow, with that. The guy has missed 23 games since 2018, so it's like he might just play himself into a job, or Lance may just have to sit there. And next thing you know, he's the starting quarterback by proxy because Garoppolo is just like, shit, he's made of glass, I have a hard time, as much as giving up all you gave for Trey Lance, 3 first-round draft picks, and you mortgaged the farm.
You did.
He has not played much football in like 24 months, or 18 months or whatever it is. And if he can show in training camp that he's up to speed and he's got your offense and you're comfortable with that 4-headed monster, handing that ball back there to the 4 running backs you have with the 2 guys that are your receivers that are injured half the season, that's a tough way to start your career. But you did give up 3 first-round picks, and your starting quarterback is literally, an injury away from a prosthetic knee or hip and being out of the league probably. So I see Garoppolo starting, but I honestly just see Lance taking over the job through sheer unfortunate, if you will,
circumstances.
Circumstances are circumstantial.
Yeah,
so.
It's the fantasy community has taken this a completely different way. Looking at how drafts have gone so far, Lance currently being drafted as QB 22. So in a superflex 2 QB, that's a starter. In the eyes of the fantasy community. Meanwhile, Jimmy G drafted at quarterback 36. So the faith in Jimmy G staying healthy, it ain't there. It's not there whatsoever.
What his futures bet is in Vegas, for him, how many games he's going to play. I should look that up, but yeah.
But it's funny because you look at what Jimmy G has been able to do in San Francisco. It hasn't been bad. It really hasn't. But
he was great. He was pretty good in 2019.
Exactly. They made the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Almost threw for 4,000 yards.
Exactly.
He was balling out. Yeah.
They've been 22-8 in their starts with Jimmy G under center. The touchdown to interception ratio of 46-26. You can't go wrong with that. And the completion percentage, if you're playing in a completion point league, if you're getting, was it 0.1 or 0.5 or whatever it may be for completions, Jimmy G is not that bad. 67.5 completion percentage over the course of his career with the Niners. And you could argue that he has the most prolific offense that he's ever had in San Francisco. You have Brandon Ayuk. You have a healthy Deebo Samuel, a healthy George Kittle. You get Trey Sermon out of the draft, out of Ohio State. In addition to that stable of running backs, like you mentioned, who knows who's going to run the ball at whatever point. But again, it's just a matter of staying healthy. And it's anybody's guess if, he actually will. But meanwhile, you look at Trey Lance. I mean, these are just video game numbers, what he put up in 2019. He had 28 passing touchdowns and no interceptions at North Dakota State. It is North Dakota State.
He threw 2 over my head in that one game again, but with that being said, I was up all night the night before playing PlayStation. So, come on. But no, I'm just teasing. I mean, that's remarkable, man. That's amazing.
Yeah. And then, he had one game. It more or less was just a showcase game in 2020 because and he didn't do that well. FCS at D2, whatever they're in at this point. 149 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception in that game. I'm not convinced he's ready. I'm not convinced he's going to return a QB2 offering to fantasy teams this year, especially when you look at a lot of other guys that are falling around that ADP. If you're going to give me the choice between Trey Lance and Sam Darnold in Carolina, give me Sam Darnold. Yeah. Give me that guy who, again, I'm going to bank on getting away from Adam Gase is going to be beneficial, in addition to being a guy surrounded by Christian McCaffrey, DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, and the rest of that offense that is able to get down the field with very little issue and put up very fantasy relevant numbers, which they were able to do with a really crappy quarterback situation last year, even though Teddy Bridgewater is better than Drew Lock, but that's a whole nother story.
It's another segment.
But, we'll see what happens. I mean, I'd be shocked if he started before November. I think that's kind of my point there, but QB 22, hands off. I don't have a single share of him in a redraft league. You couldn't convince me whatsoever.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on that one for sure. Yeah, I mean, roll the dice with Jimmy G, but yeah, staying away from Trey. Exactly. But once he gets in there and you can pick him up off the waiver wire and he starts balling out, and then next thing you know, you may look like a genius. I think it was 6 out of 8 QB fantasies had over 300 yards rushing, I think it was. So if he can get Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers were the only two that didn't do that. So it's like if you get a guy that can run the ball a little bit, you put up some fantasy numbers, get Lance laid on after he's, steps in after Garoppolo slips in the shower, and next thing you know, here we go.
Hanging out with this porn star girlfriend there.
Hey, sucks to be him, Sucks to be him.
We'll touch on one more topic before we get to our segments here and give you a little bit of a preview of what is to come this season. We're going to talk a little COVID. Our good friend Cole Beasley, he's got plenty to say
tons
about
of friends.
The situation. But following what we saw in 2020, do you think we might see similarities in 2021 to players missing a fair amount of time because of these new variants that are going out? And is it something that fantasy players should prep for in this season?
I mean, it's a lot to unpack there. I mean, you can look at it from like a commissioner standpoint. How do you address that? If you're taking over, if you're running a league with COVID, and we can break that down. But I do think it's going to have a negative impact on the league. I think even Caden said before, was it someone's out 10 days? I forget the gentleman. I think it was running back.
Gus Edwards.
Thank you. Yeah. So he's out for 10 days. So, in theory, if that's the protocol now moving forward, and I think you have to have, I forget how many negative tests before you can return back to the, team facilities. But if you're missing 10 days, you're missing at least one game, could be two, depending on where it falls, and so as a fantasy owner, you definitely should think about it. But I think there's probably going to be a master list somewhere of players that aren't vaccinated, which is kind of a crazy thing to think about. And you may be able to utilize that to your advantage if you're really going down that rabbit hole. But you will see some impact along the way this year for sure. I mean, you can't get away from cousin COVID over here, man. It's, unfortunately, it's something I think we're going to be dealing with for a long time. And Goodell has really said, look, take care of yourselves, do what you got to do. If you get sick and you're not vaccinated, sucks to be you, because now you are out of money. You are screwing your team over. And I don't know if I necessarily agree with how they're all doing this, but with that being said, we're going to see a negative impact. Yeah. And what about you, Steven?
Yeah, I mean, you got Cole Beasley, who's threatening retirement, and I know that the protocol is laid out as well. Here from Cars, the Cole Beasley Award for most games missed. It's one of those things where you definitely have that concern about it, and we've heard from various bigger players around the league, Deandre Hopkins being one of them, and even saying when this news came out, I need to rethink my career in the NFL. And it's like, DeAndre Hopkins, okay, I mean, you're talking a big-time player, a big-time wide receiver that has serious implications on a fantasy scale. It would not shock me if there is at least one breakout that causes issues. I don't think it's going to be as serious as what we saw last year between the Ravens. I know they had plenty of players.
They were decimated.
The Titans as well. Where there were just a couple teams that could not get through it and missed multiple weeks with what was going on. And the fact that the NFL has more or less put their foot down and said, listen, if your team causes a game not to be played, you're forfeiting. Like, that's all there is to it. You're forfeiting. And that's a serious thing, especially from a fantasy perspective. And I'm, Bob here, is there a way you can find out who exactly is vaccinated? That's not going to happen. I don't think there will be a list out there ever that will say those types of things. However, you
Never
know.
know.
Yeah, you never know. And, we're sitting here kind of wringing our hands over, okay, well, bye weeks here, bye weeks here. I mean, this could be a surprise bye week for a lot of players, given the fact that this game may not end up happening in the long run. And you've got a big goose egg sitting on the board there. I think, thankfully, looking at how things did progress last year and how the league did handle it, that there wasn't that last minute shock of, oh, well, he's out and there's nothing I can do about my lineups with the exception of like a Monday night situation.
There was just one or two Monday night games. I think that that did happen. And I think to your point though, Steven, there will be enough notice. I think the way the protocols are in place and the way they're testing players, the infrastructure set up where they're going to catch a positive test before, like, they'll be able to announce it for the league's sake, not for fantasy's sake, but, we do benefit from that,
Right, exactly. And, follow up here, Bob asking, do you think you should devalue players that have declared that they would not get vaccinated? I'm going to say no. That's not something that I would consider to be a deal breaker when I'm reviewing my boards and looking at who I may or may not select. You need to
trade me DeAndre Hopkins. Go ahead. I'll take him at a lower value, please.
I mean, you need to go into your drafts with the understanding that, or the belief, I should say, that players are going to play all 17 games now, and that they aren't going to miss time, that there isn't going to be an injury. This is something that you can't weigh too much on. And again, it's like sitting here and saying, for example, you have Saquon Barkley going in the first round of drafts, and he's coming back from an ACL tear. He said that there's a good chance he'll start on the PUP, and they're just going to slowly move him along to get him up to speed at his own pace. I'd be more worried about those types of things. And if you're not worried about those types of things and you're worried about this, you got to flip the concerns.
Yeah, we're looking
around.
at it backwards. Yeah, we're putting the cart before the horse for sure. Yeah. And to Alex's point in the chat, he was saying, players and coaches who are vaccinated are still testing positive, and I think one of the things we're learning, and no scientists here, never claimed to be one, but I don't know if that means that you have the virus shorter amount of time, or is it lasts, I just know that if I get sick, then I'm not going to be as sick from what they're saying because I'm vaccinated. Right. But who knows? Nobody knows. But, Alex brings up a good point. Even though they're taking care of themselves, guys are still testing positive, and they're still missing camp, and they could miss games. So it's going to be interesting, but hopefully, the NFL, if they're putting their foot down as hard as they have that infrastructure, safety net, protocol, what have you, to make sure they're catching the players positive, ensuring they get the health and safety and everything they need. But also we can learn who's going to be playing on Thursdays, Sundays, and Mondays,
Yep, and hope that there's not much concern otherwise. So with that being said, we're going to hop into some of the segments that you'll be seeing here on One Up Fantasy this season. And our first one, we like to call it Glitches and Cheat Codes. So throughout the season, we'll be talking about sits and starts, booms and busts, everything, recapping previous weeks, looking forward to future games. But for this instance, we're going to be talking about average draft positions, steals, and busts. So that's going to be the discussion here, who we feel is going to be an absolute steal at their current price in drafts, and who you should just keep your hands off because it's more than likely going to backfire in your face. So with that being said, we'll start with the positives here. We'll start with
go ahead, Steven. Why don't you kick this off?
Okay, we'll kick this off. We'll go with players who we believe will outperform their average draft position. I'm going to start in Kansas City, a guy that had all the hype in the world in 2020. And for an extent there, he did live up to it. He was RB11 through 6 weeks. And then here comes Le'Veon Bell, and the running game that no one really wanted to go near. It's Clyde Edwards-Elaire as the guy. Currently an ADP that's floating around the beginning of the third round, an ADP of 25. This is CEH's offense now. There's really not much else sitting there for him to get caught up against in terms of competition in that backfield. And Andy Reid and fantasy relevant running backs, they go hand in hand. They are always doing great things for fantasy rosters. And yeah, last year was a bit rough around the edges. You watch CEH have his struggles with injuries down the stretch, but knowing that this is his backfield, knowing how prolific this Chiefs offense is, I'd be buying him at the turn. If I'm sitting there at, the 101, I've already stacked Christian McCaffrey to start my draft, and I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, okay, the 212, the 301, take another running back, take CEH. That would be one of the guys that I look at as a definite option there.
I like that. I like how you just broke that down. That was pretty insightful. We're going to have a lot of that going on this upcoming fantasy football season. Wouldn't you say, Steven?
Yes, that we will.
And I think with your pontification there, I'm wondering if you had another one in the cooker, because I like the way that you broke that down. And I was curious because I know we picked somebody the same. So I was hoping maybe you had somebody else that you could circle back around and help me out here, so we're not going to drown, because you nailed two of mine right now. And I would like you to, because I know you have somebody else, because I know we talked about this before. So
all good, man.
Yeah.
No worries whatsoever. Let's look at the wide receiver room for who you might be looking to stack the back end of that roster. A guy, again, that last year had a lot of hype. He was a very high draft pick last year for the Las Vegas Raiders, and that being Henry Ruggs. Again, the speedster, the way that he is able to get down the field and separate from his defender is world class. No one had more separation against their defender in the NFL last year than Henry Ruggs, and that's something that needs to come into play here, given the fact that his quarterback, Derek Carr, is very, very accurate in deep ball passing. And a lot of people don't necessarily realize what he has been able to do with deep ball passing as well. And in terms of his accuracy, I'm all on board. An ADP of 130, you got to go and get rolling here, especially when you have Nelson Aguilar that is no longer with the team. He was that deep threat. He was supposed to be that guy.
You can that's Derek Carr got Aguilar all that bread over in New England because of that accuracy, right?
Yep, exactly. And, you look at what he did in that offense and the fact that Ruggs should be that guy in this offense. I don't want to hear about 32-year-old John Brown. I want to hear about the young guy out of Bama, and that's Henry Ruggs. Again, world-class speed. There's been a lot of talk that he's looked like a completely different player this offseason, having the full offseason under his belt. It's just a matter of John Gruden getting him the ball. That's been the biggest thing here.
Gruden's going to Gruden,
Yeah, Gruden's going to Gruden with his 10-year deal.
Oh, yeah.
What are we, year 4? Year 3? I don't even know. I've lost track. I just know that it's a lot, and I'm sure there's still
the Bobby Bonilla contract of football.
He'll be getting paid all the way until we're all 80, until he's dead in the ground. Players who will bust at ADP. You got somebody there?
I do. We were talking about it, and I feel that Julio Jones, with his ADP, with going to a new team, I feel that he's a guy that it's Julio, right? And everyone's like, oh, he's going to have an amazing season, and he's one of the best wide receivers, but he's at where he's at with an ADP right now. And I truly think that AJ Brown and Julio, on top of Derrick Henry getting the ball as many times as he does, I just think that he could be a guy that you're going to kind of regret drafting as your season progresses. Then again, I could be completely wrong, but Julio makes me nervous this year. He's a guy I've always been big on. He's got a lot of miles on those tires. And, he's also been, I don't want to say he's been injured because he still plays a ton of football because he plays hurt and he's a warrior. But I just, if you're taking him like in the 4th round and you're feeling pretty good about it because that's kind of where he's falling right now. I'm wondering if that might even be a little bit of a reach. That's just me, not high on him. I think he could be a bust this year going into fantasy, as much as everyone is so excited about Julio going there. And I may be a little bit against the grain here, Steven, because it's Julio frickin' Jones, but new offense, new quarterback. There's a lot of new things going on, but this could be just a freezing cold take in a few months, but that's where I'm at right now on my pick.
Yeah, no, I hear you on Julio. I mean, I think the thing that worries me the most about him kind of stems from the fact that he's going to Tennessee and he's no longer in the dome. He's no longer in that turf setting, and now going to Tennessee. The positive to look at the opposite side of this is that he's not going to be seeing the double, the triple teams that he was seeing in Atlanta.
True.
With A.J. Brown. He's no longer the number one guy. And yeah, you could argue that Calvin Ridley became that number one guy for the Falcons last year over the stretch. But, that opportunity for him to kind of just relax back and worry about those one-on-ones, which I don't think he has any issue in winning whatsoever. Is something there. But that being said, he's getting old. He's got those miles, like you said. Yeah. It's tough.
New offensive coordinator. Tough. There's a lot of new things going on, in Tennessee. Who knows? But then again, like you said, you take away those triple coverages and those triple teams and the double teams, and you get Julio one-on-one with somebody. I mean, that's probably every quarterback's wet dream. So, with that being said, it's, I might have just talked myself out of my own pick here, but, shit, but actually you talked me out of it, Steven, because, you're so damn good at what you do, so look at that. See?
Hey, no, I'll be honest. I have a few shares of him. So you know what? I can't really say much. I'm banking on the points of, please just don't let him be the focal point of an offense. And hey, it helps A.J. Brown too. So it's happiness all around in Tennessee, just as long as Ryan Tannehill gets it done.
No Adam Gase and see what happens, just going back to the Gase effect.
Sam Darnold, folks. Yeah. Sam Darnold season. I'm gonna go on the ground game here.
Okay.
It's a guy that I have wanted to be so good for so long, and it's Steve. Gotten absolutely nowhere. Miles Sanders is the guy that I cannot bring myself to draft in 2021. He's got an ADP of 35 right now. That's the end of the 3rd round. At the end of the 3rd round, I'm still expecting a workhorse running back for what I want, and Miles Sanders ain't it. You look at Kerryon Johnson now there, Kenneth Gainwell through the draft, Boston Scott, who was a backup dandy a year ago. But this is the thing that's aggravating, is because you look at what Sanders has been able to do. He had a 5.3 yard per carry average. The guy can run the damn ball.
He can play.
He can, but he only eclipsed 100 yards twice and only 20 carries once. That ain't going to cut it for a bell cow running back. And then you
78 catches out of the backfield, not bad.
Yeah, you can't argue with that. But then Nick Sirianni comes out and says, we need to have a solid running back on downs 1 and 2, and then a solid passing back on 3rd down. 2 different guys. I don't want to hear about 2 different guys. I want to hear about Miles Sanders going 1, 2, 3. And forget about these other 3 guys, but we're not getting that. We're getting every indication of what it quite possibly could be the worst running back by committee room that we've ever seen in Philly. And it's aggravating to me. And I'm not going to spend a 3rd round pick on a guy that could potentially be in that situation.
Hell no. No, you're 100% right, Steve. And I think with the Eagles have a slew of issues. Jalen Hurts is now in a quarterback competition. The new head coach looks like he doesn't even want to stand in front of the media and talk about football right now. I think that I think Miles Sanders at 36, 35, whatever, with the ADP, I am staying the hell away from that as well. I just think the Eagles are in some trouble this year. I think the person that's going to do the most running is Jalen Hurts. I think that they're going to end up having he may be running for his life a little bit over there with some of the issues they have going on and with the offensive line. But, all that being said, I echo your sentiment with Miles Sanders. There's just way too many unknowns and way too many backs back there to be secure. And I'm thinking that's going to work out for you if you're taking him in the third round,
Yep. For sure. And, maybe I'll eat my words. It's happened before. It's happened many times, but here we are still talking.
But that's what the internet's for. It's recording it so then they can play it back and be like, I told you so. Remember you said Julio Jones, you idiot, right? So, yeah.
Always recording, always watching.
Of course. Blake
we're going to move on. We're going to move on to the next segment. It's a little segment we like to call Speed Run. So with this one, it is very, very simple. Both Chris and myself have written down a this or that type situation with 5 different player pairings. I guess we'll call that different positions. Yeah. We're going to rapid fire which guy we'd rather have in said situations. We'll recap it all once we wrap up. You guys can yell at us in the comments.
Oh, yeah. Let us know.
Or agree. Let us know. We're always here. We're always ready to roll. So with that being said, do you want to answer first or do you want me to answer first?
You know what? You got to start last time. I know, if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind throwing my hat in the ring here. I'm going to start with a running back, running backs, if that's cool. Or do you want to go right from quarterback down? How would you like to play it?
Let's just go all the way down. Let's go through your full list and hit me with it.
All right, so I got Justin Herbert or Russell Wilson.
Justin Herbert.
All right. I got CEH, Josh Jacobs.
CEH.
I knew that. All right, this is a 3-headed monster because they're all so similar with the ADPs here. David Montgomery, Chris Carson, or your boy, Miles Sanders.
Oh, Bears fandom, I think, has me with Montgomery on that one.
Okay. I was going to bring that up before, so I'm glad you actually said that because we're end up talking about it now. So good deal. Let's see. DK Metcalf, Calvin Ridley. All right. And then I'll wrap it up here with a tight end. Pretty simple, but would you rather have Darren Waller or George Kittle?
George Kittle. Kittle is my guy.
All right. Those are all PPR ADPs, just for everybody listening. So that's where I got. That's what we're bracing. That's where I was basing my list from. Is who would you rather have based on the ADP? So we'll break it down.
Would you rather is more or less the setup there. So you kind of going back to that, man. Like David Montgomery. Let's talk some Bears a little bit. I know we're going to get into a couple Bears here later. There's something about him, and I can't put my finger on it. Looking at the schedule that he finished with last year, played very soft run defenses, had really nobody to contend with for getting touches out of the backfield. I don't know if that's going to be duplicated because, as we all know, this is a very tough Bears schedule. In addition, they bring in Damian Williams from Kansas City, who is a very capable running back.
Absolutely.
You get Tariq Cohen back healthy, and then you have Khalil Herbert, who God knows what his role is going to be, but we all know that Ryan Nall got touches last year, so it's anybody's guess if Ryan Nall could even get touches again this year. There's something about it, though, where I think, based on the conversations even that Matt Nagy had today in his presser, he wants to get David Montgomery the ball 20 times a game. I hate saying it because I've been duped by him numerous times, but I kind of believed him today. I think he believes Montgomery is the guy.
I think he's starting to, he's smelling the roses over there in Chicago. I think Nagy's starting to figure out to be successful, he's going to have to run the rock, and then he's going to have to sprinkle in some Justin Fields, but we'll get to that. But yeah, if David Montgomery can get his hands on the ball 20 times a game, I mean, that's going to open up some things. They're saying he's faster this year, as we know, through our channels here, that, he's increased his foot speed. He's really he's looking strong heading into this year. And if he can improve on the foot speed, and that equates to more yards per carry down the line, we're looking at a much more successful running back, which then equates to hopefully some more touchdowns for our beloved Chicago Bears, So, I'm a homer with Montgomery. We were talking about some trades before, and you were like, I don't know. And then Nagy comes out, says 20 carries, and you're like, shit, now I believe Nagy. So now I'm like, how do I make the trade? Like, what do I do? But yeah, Montgomery could be one of those guys. I know in a chat, everyone's top 10 running back and which would be amazing. But if history is any indicator of what we're looking at, he's got a little bit of work to do. But as a Bears fan, I could see that happening. And I'm pretty optimistic. So I'm with you. If we're getting the ball 20 times, I mean, shit, I might have to order a 32 jersey.
Right. It's been a long time. Well, I guess not really. Matt Forte was the last jersey I had from running back in blue and orange.
I got Peyton. That's it. And I don't even want to tell you the other jerseys that I've purchased, because I can't even.
I got
hang
Anthony
them on
Thomas, man. I don't even get me started.
I got Kevin White, dude. I mean, come on,
pain. Pain.
Yeah, I was gonna buy the Amari Cooper jersey, but ended up with we ended up with Kevin White.
Oh, twist the knife a little bit.
Salt the wound. Yep.
All right. Well, let's get to your 5 matchups here.
All right, talk to me.
We're gonna start it off with wide receiver, Mike Evans or Chris Godwin.
Ooh, I'm gonna go with Chris Godwin.
Okay. Yeah. T. Higgins or Jamar Chase?
I think T. Higgins. I like T. Higgins. We'll talk about that, right?
Myles Gaskin or Mike Davis?
I don't like either of them. I'm going to say Myles Gaskin.
Dallas Goedert or Noah Fant?
I like Dallas Goedert.
Can't argue with you there. And then lastly, Tom Brady or Ryan Tannehill?
I'm going to go with Brady. There we go.
Brady. Okay.
Yeah. Let's talk about it.
So you seem like the one here. I think you want to talk about this one more than anyone. T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. Jamar
Higgins.
Chase, very underrated in my opinion. I think he's very underrated, and I think you feel the same way about that.
About who? I'm sorry.
About T. Higgins.
Oh yes,
I
do.
Pretty underrated.
I mean, look what he did last year. I mean, he had Tyler Boyd. I mean, he outperformed. Speaking of guys that outperformed their ADP, he was outstanding last year. I mean, he was something to be marveled at, and I was really impressed. Now you add Jamar Chase to that, and it almost goes to your point about Julio Jones. If they're focusing on Jamar Chase and Tyler Boyd, I mean, they obviously have to address T. Higgins, but there's a lot of guys to defend there, and if he's lining up with one of those three, I think that he could have a very, very strong follow-up season to what he did last year. I think that he's somebody that you may be able to get a little later on, because I think what's Chase? He's like a 50 ADP, about 54. Off the top of my head, I don't have it in front of me right here, but I think he's right around 54.5. But if you were able to get Higgins, I think he'd be a steal. But then again, it's the Bengals. Joe Burrow's coming back from a knee injury. He's looking good. I think that they could be in line for pretty stellar offensive output over there in Cincinnati. Granted, they don't have an indoor training facility, and I think they use like the Cincinnati Bearcats, and they got second-rate facilities there. But I wouldn't want to play in Cincinnati if I was a pro. But with that being said, I think T. Higgins could be like a a monster this year. I really do.
Yeah, it would not shock me at all. Had 908 yards his rookie season, and Joe Burrow was injured for a large portion of that, and the quarterback play out of the Bengals was nothing to write home about after that happened. The nice thing about this is Joe Burrow is 100% heading into this season, and on top of that, the defense is god awful. This is a defense that you do not want to start in any situation if your league starts a defense special team unit, hands down. And here we are, looking at a situation where it's very possible that they could be supporting 2, maybe 3 wide receivers at over 1,000 yards on the season. The thing that worries me about Ja'Marr Chase, he took the entire 2020 season off. He opted out at LSU and went to focus on the NFL draft, went to focus on getting his pro career started. And, there's something about it that I
ring rust is a real thing. I mean,
and
caught up to game speed.
And now that you have, Tyler Boyd is still there. Tyler Boyd is still a very good wide receiver. Don't get me wrong.
Absolutely.
But I think a lot of people are sleeping on T. Higgins as a guy that can take the ball and run with it. I 100% agree with you there between those two. And you can get T. Higgins a round or more later than Ja'Marr Chase, which is fantastic value.
That is amazing.
In my opinion, given the fact that, he's in year 2 and is prime for what could be a very big sophomore season.
He'll outperform Chase this year. I really think so. Getting him 15 picks after you could get Ja'Marr Chase, that's pretty crazy. I mean, that value, that's a boom right there, in my opinion. I think T. Higgins is a dude that, somebody to keep an eye on, if you're in a draft with me. So, watch out.
You heard it here first. It's going to be T. Higgins over Ja'Marr.
We got
Chase.
Leagues and drafts.
Jackle guarantees
coming up, right? There it is.
All right, well, we got one more segment. We like to wind things down with a little bit of just fun off the board. And for those of you that are sticking around, I know we got plenty of the TTNL family still around as well. And it's the talk that a lot of you have been waiting for. So let's get into it. We call it Side Quest. Now, this doesn't necessarily have to be fantasy related. We're just here to have some fun, to talk whatever the hell comes up. And today just so happens to be Bears training camp. We're going to give you a little bit of chat. The veterans reported today, as we all know, Matt Nagy, Ryan Pace talking to the media. A very interesting press conference from Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace. As you can see, the handsome quarterback on that lower third graphic on your screen, Justin Fields. All offseason, we heard from Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy. Andy Dalton is the starter week 1.
QB1.
There is
QB1,
no way.
QB1.
There is no way that Justin Fields can be the starter week 1. And then today happened. And he
what happened
refused.
Today, Steven?
He refused, even though he had every opportunity in the world to say Justin Fields will not be starting week 1.
They literally put it on a tee for him, and he,
It did not happen.
Nope.
He said, Matt Nagy said this when asked if Justin Fields could change the minds of the coaching staff if he goes out and crushes it. He said that would be awesome if he goes out and crushes it. For Justin, for Andy, for Nick, their job is to go into this thing and just dominate. And then for all of us, we make it as hard as you possibly can at every position. We don't even get into that part of it. We just say, listen, go play ball, be the best you can be. Trust me, just like everyone here and in this city, I want Justin to be electric. But for us, we're worried about today.
Yes.
At no point did he say no. And then he comes back with this and says, what I can tell you now is we've had 3 days of being together in rookie camp, and I was really impressed with the way Justin came back from OTAs until these last 3 days coming in and out of the huddle and seeing things. You can see he did his homework. He came out and got every rep today. Both Dalton and Foles were not in practice today. And Nagy said, quote, he took advantage of it. He checked all of the boxes. Man, I got to tell you, there's some stuff here that's really got me going from there's not a chance in hell he's touching the field in LA to week 1 to, ooh, he might be touching the field in LA in week 1.
What a difference 24 hours can make, huh? I mean, holy shit. Nagy just putting it out there like that. I mean, what did he think was going to happen when he said that? I mean, every single Twitter feed, Instagram, you name it, was just like Matt Nagy has basically left that window open. We may see Justin Fields week 1. And, there's other people who are like, oh, it's too early. And, we all want the same thing, right? For our, Chicago Bears fans, you can't speak to those assholes that wish injuries on players and things like that, but we don't have to get into that. But we want Justin Fields to go out and do what we expect him to do and what we've seen him to do at Ohio State. And Matt Nagy is seeing that progress so early on. It's pretty astounding. It's showing the work that he put in. He's putting Dan Orlovsky to shame, who said he's like the last guy in, first guy out. And Allen Robinson said today, he's the first guy in, last guy out, and that's what we want. And he's young. He's fighting for his job, and this is a great start to training camp. Start to our season. This is exactly what we were hoping for, right? Is to get not only hopefully Justin Fields, but we get to talk about maybe it happening, like legitimately, not just kind of wishful thinking. We actually have a legit chance of seeing him out in LA.
I mean, and speaking of Dan Orlovsky, I mean, you can just launch him into the sun. He's talking today how he reheats pasta with ketchup, and you can just get the hell out. Anyway, it's interesting just to see, and I'm seeing comments here as well. AJ saying never give a presser that you can trust what he says, though. Yes, I agree with that, but this is different.
Yes,
for the fact that he's flat out said it's not
the complete
happening.
Opposite. He said the opposite up until today. So that's like a stark comparison.
Because I'm sitting here, I'm writing down notes. I'm like, okay, it's status quo, and I'm just waiting for it and waiting for it and waiting for it, and it never came. And it's like, okay. And then he goes on and he says, the plan is to be very aggressive with the preseason because it's real action. It's real games. Yeah. And the reason that Fields is QB2 on the depth chart is specifically because of getting snaps. And it's not just going to be Justin Fields getting the snaps, but he's also saying that Andy Dalton is going to get significant snaps. And the way that it was worded, the way that he was saying things, the way that he was going on about praising where Justin is in the process, he stopped short by the slimmest of margins of calling it a quarterback battle.
Yeah.
And
he wanted to dip his toes in that water. It felt like he couldn't do that. I mean, it would have just set off like 4 alarm fires. It would have been crazy if he actually did that, and said, Justin's going to fight for this job, which would have just, if he came out and just was so direct, leaving it open the way he did was, the way. But
yeah, all he had to do was just status quo from what he's been doing the entire time. And I've seen a lot of comparisons to the situation that happened in Seattle when Russell Wilson was a rookie, where Matt Flynn was given a lot of money, and then all of a sudden here comes Danger Russ, and
Russ can cook.
All of a sudden here he is, week 1 starter, and Matt Flynn never sees the field for the Seattle Seahawks, just pocketing all that money.
Hey. But Seattle did not mind, right? They were winning.
No, they didn't.
They were doing pretty well, right? So it was money well spent.
Yeah, and that's the thing is you've got a situation in which it's obviously eye-opening to these coaches. It's obviously a situation where they're realizing they might have actually made the correct decision, which, as we all know, the last 4 years, the quarterback position not something that you want to write home about, but here we are with who looks like a completely different quarterback, both physically and mentally, for what he can bring to the field. And honestly, I'm just at a point where it's like, get me to that Dolphins game and let's just see things cook. This is going to be a long 3 weeks, and I'm or 2.5 weeks, whatever it is. But I just want to see
the season's like 44 days away or something.
Oh,
I mean, it's
man.
not far. I mean, it's literally right
counting
around the
down.
fucking corner.
It's counting. Do you have your Fields jersey already?
I have. My kids do. I'm going to say this.
But you don't.
No, here's why. I bought a Kevin White jersey. I bought a Mitch Trubisky jersey. I'm not doing that to this fan base. Not that I have anything. I'm not putting that juju out there. I am keeping my kids with the dope jerseys. I'll rock my Justin Fields t-shirt. And once he, etches it in pen, maybe I'll get my Navy Justin Fields jersey.
You're sacrificing your
I have to
yourself for everything.
I'm wearing sweetness anyway. Who am I? I'm going to wear sweetness, so you can't go wrong there.
Yeah. No.
Do you have it? Do you have your Justin Fields jersey?
So I don't yet. However, I've got. I'm one of those weird people that wears like the hooded T-shirts.
Yeah.
And so there was a jersey that had the hood on it.
Yeah.
Like I'm buying this. Like,
what color did you get? The navy blue?
The navy with the big bear symbol in the front, Fields one on the back. I'm set for now. I'm kind of the same way. So I know there's a lot of TTNL people going to Pittsburgh in November. I don't know if you're going to be one of them.
I'll be there.
Perfect. So I'm kind of waiting for that moment because we're driving out there and doing that. My wife's a big Steelers fan.
Oh, nice.
So, that's the thing we've done every year since we've been together is the Bears-Steelers games. And so definitely looking forward to that. But I think I'm waiting for that moment just to confirm that everything's okay. And I mean, I'm still scarred because the last jersey I bought was Mitch. Bad choice.
I'm with you. See, I mean, AJ's letting me know my wall of shame. Seriously, that was, I have an Urlacher jersey. Depending on where you stand, so many people think that's a shitty jersey too. But I love 54. Singletary. I got some good ones too. But I got a Cutler jersey. I got a Cutler jersey. But yeah, Kevin White is still brand new. Like literally, I've never washed it. I think I bought it, looked at it, and then I think he broke his ribs or something, and that was it.
Makes for a good car washing towel.
Yeah,
maybe. I don't know. The value's depreciated.
Very much so.
But nevertheless, it's a very exciting first day just from that press conference alone. Yeah. There's camp tomorrow, the practices tomorrow that are open to the public. Man, it feels so far away, but it's not all at the same time.
44 days. Like literally Bob put it in there, 44 days until we are officially going. Like, but preseasons are like you said, what is it? 2.5 weeks?
Yeah. 2.5 weeks. So 2 weeks from Saturday is game one. And they do have some joint practices with the Dolphins as well up at Hallis Hall prior to that game, Saturday, the 14th of August. So that is the countdown there to the Bears preseason kickoff. But man, it's so much adrenaline already, and it's only July 27th.
Yeah, it's crazy.
You ask for anything better. It's better. Oh. It's better than previous years where you just have that existential dread over you and just waiting to be disappointed in some shape or form. But here we are.
After today, Aaron Rodgers reports today, and you're like, who fucking cares? One more. You got 17 games, and say la vie, go where you got to go. Get out of Chicago. We'll take Devontae Adams over to Chicago though next year. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. We'll take him.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to wrap things up here for One Up Fantasy. We do appreciate each and every one of you that has tuned in with us here over the last hour. We have plenty to talk about before the season kicks off. We're going to be doing some mock drafts. We're going to be bringing in some great guests from fantasy pros, from football guys across the board in the fantasy realm. They will be here to help answer your questions. And if you would like to be featured on One Up Fantasy, follow the directions below. Email shycitysports100@gmail.com. with your video featuring your fantasy question for a chance to be featured on the show. We've also got TTNL drafts that are going to be happening as well with our Patreon members.
Yes, sir.
On the TTNL side. So that is very exciting as well. And again, plenty to talk about. I know draft season is just getting underway. I know I've got a lot of people that are already asking me, what the hell are you doing drafting already?
Yeah.
We're here to be degenerates to help you one up the competition. That's all it's what it's about. Every Tuesday at 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 Central. So, Jackal, I'd say it was a successful show in the books to kick things
day
off.
One in the books, I had to say, outside of a couple stumbling blocks initially, I think we hit the ground running, man. a lot of good stuff here, man. I'm looking forward to the season, man. The fantasy football season's here. Shit. I'm going to send those trades out. I'm going to make that trade for Kamara tonight. I'm excited.
Make sure it's still there waiting for you.
Hey, man, I'm looking at the phone. Nothing's changed yet, so let's see what,
Just keep hitting that refresh button.
Ain't that the truth, man? But it was awesome. I'm happy to be here with you, man. Looking forward to an awesome fantasy season and sharing it with the rest of the degenerates out here listening.
Absolutely.
And watching.
We got plenty to talk about, like we said, and we will be here next week, same time, same place, for some more fun fantasy talk. So until then, I don't know which way I'm pointing. This guy right here is Chris Jackal. I'm Steven Johnson. Thank you for watching. Have a great rest of your week. Stay tuned for Keeping It 100 tomorrow night with Shane.
Josh E. We got some guests coming in, Josh E. And who knows who else will pop in. Yeah, there'll be a Nerds Alert somewhere, somehow, I'm sure.
It'll all be good.
But Phil's watching from the DR, I'm sure, taking notes.
Got his ass tan today, so we'll be here to talk everything Bears and much more in fantasy next week. So have a great rest of the night. Have a great rest of the week.
Good night, everybody.
See you next week on One Up Fantasy.